I couldn't think of a better way to spend my wonderful 4th of July than with my microphone and camera, jumping into the topic that has been baking in my brain for weeks now, right? And I was just, I listen, I got so distracted. I had to slap on the camera, turn on the microphone, except I didn't hit record in either of those cases because I was just so excited. So yeah, I think big movies are a problem, and we should definitely discuss it. So I think we should jump in. All right. Okay. So for those of you who probably are aware, The Flash and big budget movies like The Flash and Indiana Jones and some animated films, and which, then there's like earlier in the year, like, or last year, like Black Adam or Shazam or, Guardians of the Galaxy, like all these films, right? What do they have in common? Well, they're superhero films, Adam. Am I an idiot? No, I don't think you're an idiot, but there is something more to this than what is actually on the surface, right? So let's dig in, shall we? The first part of all this is the IP. The IP of, Marvel, Star Wars, DC, and other franchises alike. Ghostbusters is one that comes to mind. There are few, and of course Indiana Jones. With all these in mind, the one thing, of course, they have in common is that they have a pre-built audience, meaning like you get dummies like me who show up to the movie theater regardless of what it is, to watch these films. Now, yes, The Flash, Dial of Destiny, Indiana Jones, like these are, I'll just say they're fine films. They're okay. they're okay. They're okay. I can understand why people have an aversion to watch The Flash because of controversial reasons, and I can see why, even on different from that, it's expensive to go see a movie, right? It's like $14 pushing, or $13. And it's a huge investment. There's a whole production, especially with families and such like that, or, you get people like me who just miss out on a few films because it's not worth it. Of course, these films are fine, and yeah, I would definitely want to see them, but of course I can't watch every single movie because, I mean, what am I, fucking made of money? Are you kidding me, dude? Shit's getting expensive, okay? Which, I'm getting ahead of myself. We're going to talk about, it's going to be a callback, all right? And hopefully I'm not dumb enough to miss that callback later in this podcast. So, strap in, okay? Now, leads to my second part. Or, well, actually 1.5, okay? And that is, actually, no. It does lead to the second part. Okay, so the part 2 is time, okay? Time is God, right? So in the 2010s, we got all of the bangers, right? All the Marvel bangers, all of the Star Wars bangers, you name it, right? Avengers, come on, give me a break, will ya? And then let's rewind a little bit more, okay? The 2000s. Now, yeah, these are mostly franchises. It's just all Harry Potter, Shrek, shout out, and Lord of the Rings, all this, right? So clearly there's a trend even going as far as back as 2000s, right? Now that we've seen. The 90s, okay? The 90s have been a great day for, Star Wars. It's been just a great few decades for Star Wars, right? And James Cameron, shout out, with Titanic and Avatar in the 2000s, fucking A. But here's the thing, though. In the 90s, there are a few more original films. Now, in the 2010s, are there original films? Yeah. I mean, if you call Frozen an original film, right? If you call, if you call Zootopia an original film, right? If you call Bohemian Rhapsody, well, I guess it is an original film, right? But that's about it, because everything else is either sequel, franchise, IP, existing IP with reboots and all that. It's all there, right? Same with the 2000s. And then it's a little less in the 90s, right? It's a little less, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, right? Because like we got a few bangers. I mean, come on, right? I mean, Titanic is, come on. Independence Day. Yeah, Independence Day, Forrest Gump, Sixth Sense, banger. Men in Black. Well, Men in Black is a franchise, I want to say, because it was a comic book. Ghost, come on. Though Swayze himself, come on, dude. Give me a break. The Matrix, I mean, Bubba Water, fucking Manosphere Takeover, and then we got the Mummy, another banger, Mrs. Doubtfire. Come on, how many times have you seen Robin Williams act like a perfect Irish or Scottish? I'm so sorry. I don't know who he was trying to make an impression of, but yes, just a sweet old lady. You know what I mean? And then you got True Lies. Come on. Banger. Toy Story. That's the first film I ever saw in the movie theaters, actually. Fun fact. Something About Mary. Okay, interesting. Wow, that's actually very interesting. It's in the top 30 highest grossing films of the 90s. Listen, nothing against Ben Still's, I mean, God bless, take care. American Beauty, The Mask, Speed, Deep Impact, The Rock, and Tomorrow Never Die. Well, that's Bond. And then Seven, come on. Can't forget about Seven. It's in the 50th top grossing films. You know what I mean? So there you have it, right? There's several more, original films in the 90s. Okay. Then let's go to the 80s. The 80s is very interesting, right? So there's a few original films, but for some reason in my brain, I thought there were when I was thinking about this before doing this episode, I was thinking back in like all the films that I've seen. And of course I'm not from the 80s. I was a 90s kid. So I always thought like the 80s had nothing but original films. But then as I really read through this, it's just mostly franchise or sequels and shit like that. And of course, you think of Arnold, you think of Sylvester Stallone, Dolph Lundgren, fucking, Jean-Claude Van Damme, Muscles from Brussels, and all these other, yoked dudes, right? The 80s just loved greasy yoked dudes, right? That's just kind of the way it is. But we also love crazy ass movies like Gremlins. That's some crazy shit. Top Gun, great, in my opinion, a phenomenal pride film. A phenomenal film about pride and being comfortable with who you are and embracing your sexuality, despite being in a straight relationship. In both parties. It's fascinating and heartbreaking, but very good. Three Men and a Baby, come on. That's crazy. Good Morning Vietnam, classic. Terms of Endearment, classic. Come on, but it is interesting to see that this was the beginning of franchised out the fucking wazoo, right? Like this entire decade is just franchises, from Rocky to Rambo to all these other films, right? And of course, Tom Cruise's getting his resurgence and shit like that. Yeah, it's been a huge it's been a huge decade for for a fair amount of original films, but a very big decade for franchisable existing IP films, essentially, within its sequels, right? And I don't know if it was in the 80s, if like sequels, I guess, weren't a thing. I'm sure there were sequels in the 70s and 60s and all that, but like I never seen so many sequels as I do in the 80s. Like there's a lot of sequels in the 80s, which I mean, I don't know if that's just like a calling of that decade, but if anybody in the 80s can attest to this, that there's just like way more sequels in that decade than, or at least that was the beginning of like, franchise sequels in the 80s than, before, right? So, leading into the entire point of this discussion, right? And that is original IPs, original box office hits that aren't franchised. And I'm talking about the 1970s, right? So, to be fair, Star Wars, while, yeah, it is a franchisable film, the first one came out in 1977, right? And the budget was $11 million, and it made over $200 million domestically. Worldwide, I think it's like some dumb number, like in the 600-700 range. I want to say. Yep, $775 million. And remember, this is the 70s. So that shit's a lot of cash. So going back, the 70s had The Godfather, Jaws, Grease, Smoking the Bandit, Animal House, Close Encounters of a Third Kind. I mean, it's like it's the 70s version of Arrival, essentially, except with all the weird, it's kind of a mid film. It's fine. It's whatever. Kramer versus Kramer. Come on, really? Like, that's the thing. It's like, this is a movie about divorce. It's like it's an American legal drama. And this made over $100 million. Okay, so do you catch my drift, everybody? So essentially, the 70s was like a hotbed of original content, essentially, that had just shaken the film industry. And I don't know if that was like a call to just be, oh, actually, you know what? I take that back. Yeah, it was. It did start in the 70s with Jaws 2 and Rocky 2, right? Which is interesting because Rocky 2 came out in 79 and Jaws 2 came out in 78, which meant that towards the end of that decade, a lot of these studios were like, yes, please. We're going to make Jaws fucking 9 if we have to. Shout out to Piranhas. Love Piranha. So that being said, all these films in the 70s are like mostly like originals. And this is where it's so interesting, because when you get to the 70s, or sorry, the 80s, the next decade, it is like sequels on sequels on sequels on sequels on sequels, and just franchise the fuck out on every single movie, essentially. It comes to show, ladies and gentlemen, that these films that are made with I don't want to say it was like made with a huge budget, aside from, your Godfathers and maybe your Supermans and whatnot. So yeah, there's a couple of franchise films, but most of them were original shit in the 70s. I could be wrong. This is what I'm seeing from Wikipedia. Okay, talk about Kramer versus Kramer, right? Fucking Dustin Hoffman, Meryl Streep joint, right? 8 million to make that film. $8 million. And remember, this is the 70s. So I don't know how it would be adjusted. Let's see. Pause for effect. Hold on. It would have been 62 million. Okay, so that's not a cheap movie to make. But that's Kramer versus Kramer, right? And here's the thing. It's just a divorce film. That's the funniest part about all this. It's just like, it's a divorce film and it made $173 million. Like, what? Like, I don't even think films of that like kind of nature in terms of legal drama would ever make that much. But then you might tell me, well, Adam, it's the 70s. I mean, people were still using fucking landlines and, no one had a cell phone and shit like that, which, yeah, exactly. These films were so innovative for its time that they were able to tell a story without spending all sorts of money. And that's the problem with the films, at least for me today, is that the films are unnecessarily huge and inflated for no real reason other than to just like make it as big as possible, which I can appreciate to a certain degree, but you get to the point where it's like, I don't know if I'm just sick of superhero films, or I'm just sick of like the same old kind of, cookie cutter way of telling a story, which, to be fair, in the 70s, since these are all original stories, yeah, most of them spun from like major franchises and stuff afterwards. But that's the thing, though. You can still make franchisable stuff, and people have, and there are plenty of franchisable things even today. But for independent films, it wasn't really like an idea that independent films were like a huge prevalent thing in the 70s, right? It's just the idea of, do you have an idea? Do you have a script? Let's make the script. Let's do all of the drugs in order to stay up all night to write that said script, and then we're gonna make it, and then we're gonna make like all of the fucking money, And sure, there's a few franchisable films, Star Trek, James Bond, all those films, again, were very little in comparison to the 2010s, which the only notable top grossing film were animated films, most of them. And that's not like I don't think that's a coincidence as much as just corporations just saying, you know what, let's go the easy way and know that like there's going to be a built-in audience for The Flash, and know that like nobody liked the last Indiana Jones, so let's make another one but better. And I mean, I didn't think about it till right now, and I'm like, is it better? I don't know if this new one is better than Crystal Skull, but I don't know. I mean, whatever. It's fine. Again, it's fine, right? It is an absolutely fine film. So that being said, it does make me laugh a lot to see friends of mine and people online on fucking Twitter and Reddit just absolutely going fucking nuts and saying that like, it is the woke agenda that is fundamentally destroying these films. No, no, it is the lack of creativity and imagination for most of these films, and actually take a chance on big films that we know it is taking a gamble on something that you don't fully know if it's going to work, right? Which is why Disney, Universal, all these places are not really taking any chances, because they rather make, the next Fast and Furious movie or the next Marvel film, because they know that people are going to show up and watch it. They know the name Fast and Furious. They know the name Marvel. So it's just easy cash grabs, right? Instead of going for, your occasional Everything Everywhere All at Once, or even horror films like The Conjuring, or and that even got franchised too. Again, it's like no matter what your idea is for, like, stupid shoehorned cookie cutter superhero films, you gotta realize that, like, there are original stuff out there. It's just A, not getting pushed, B, there's no marketing for this, and C, there hasn't really, like, the cult films usually don't land until video, which I don't want to say is already too late for those for those studios, especially during the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s, because Netflix and streaming didn't come till the late 2000s, right? Early 2010s was when it really popped the fuck off. So with that being said, I don't know. I don't know if we are in a so much a formulaic rut as much as, like, we are in a creative rut, and the numbers definitely show. And I'm not saying that, like, every person is hungry to find, the most original films, but if it's exciting enough and it's going to catch the attention of a lot of people come out to the movie theaters by, recommendation of other people, not by, some fucking, TV ad. Although that does help, it word of mouth never really can equate to, like, advertising or unique advertising to sell your movie, because ultimately people, again, will listen to other people. So I think that it is in corporations' best interest to really invest in those kinds of movies. And man, if I were a rich producer, it wouldn't be a second thought for me to invest more into very off the grid, like, weird, obscure independent films. But not because it's like, oh, it's art. It's like, it's more or less like, can you tell a good story? And is it a good story? And is it worth sharing with a lot of people? And I feel like the biggest problem of all with Hollywood is that, like, it's not necessarily like a way of, like, it's not, at least in my opinion, I don't think it's something that is like these producers are just looking for the best story. I think it's just easier to look for the easiest story. And I hate to say it, it works, right? I mean, it worked for me. It works for a lot of people because we turn out and we watch it. But here's the thing, though. Because these films are just mid, we go home and we don't really talk about it. They're forgettable. They are. And nothing against Indiana Jones. I've grown up watching Indiana Jones. It definitely put a sour taste in my mouth with the last one, which didn't give me a lot of hope for the new one. And I will say, for the most part, there's a lot of better parts of the story, and there's some nostalgic moments. But that's just it, though, right? And that's something that you can argue for all of them, even Marvel. It's just they hit the nostalgic value that doesn't really give you any sort of like thing that you can cling on to, relatability that makes you feel like, oh my God, like I'm going to go back and watch this movie again next weekend. Not saying everybody does, but sometimes if a movie is worth it that much, they probably just won't even worry about the other, fucking 20 other, Marvel films and just focus on that one, right? Which calls to why Everything Everywhere All at Once and films like that generally do well isn't necessarily because it's just finally different art for art's sake. It's just there's a story to be told, and you can tell these stories in so many ways that don't need a particular IP to back it up and to make sure you're going to get, asses in seats no matter what. And while I love Marvel films and I will still watch any Star Wars property because I love torturing myself. I don't know why, but I love it. I can't wait for Ahsoka. This is everything that I love. And I would watch it. Now, am I hopeful for it? I don't know. Things happen, and you get that one diamond in a rough that is just like, okay, that was great. Your Rogue Ones, right? Those are great. Those are awesome. But here's the other part of that too. I feel like it was shoved down my throat way more with Marvel and sequel trilogy films than any other Star Wars property. I mean, there's a fair amount of like advertising for all of these, respectfully, right? But of course, it's not like they're going to put all of their cash into, multiple things. That's just not what these studios do. They want to put all of their eggs in one big budget film basket, and then hopefully they think it would pay in dividends, which, yeah, right? Because, I mean, that's what happened with Marvel. So how can you know until it happens? But I think this should be a huge learning lesson, especially with the writer strike happening, which writer strike episode coming soon to a podcast near you. I do think that with all of this, will hopefully turn all this shit, just kind of shake it up, right? And maybe not turn it upside down, because there's got to be a need for great storytelling. And I don't think anybody is really like averse from that, right? And it's easier to say that there hasn't been any good movies as of the last few years, right? Which I don't necessarily agree, because there are plenty of movies that are super well fucking made, that are amazing. And we're going to get into watch list stuff here in a minute, but I want to wrap this up with the big budget movie talk. And I think that the films in the 70s were a reflection of its time, and the films with how original they are comes to show that like people definitely turn out for good shit, right? It's the same thing for music. It's the same thing for deep social movements, between strikes and maybe even social activism, and I mean they're the same shit almost, but like even as far as like demonstrations and shit like that. And these films, while they are amazing, again, they clearly show that like the time was so uncertain that like even the film industry was like, you know what, we'll take a chance on these films because we like the story, we think it's engaging, and we think that there could be something with it. I watch, I'd say, quite a fair bit of movies. And there's plenty of movies today that are so good that baffles me how not many people really see it, but then it in turn doesn't, right? Because I see all these other films, it's like, oh, because all of the Marvel, Star Wars, all this shit is so jammed down your throat at all times, it doesn't even give you room to enjoy anything else that could possibly be there. Well, of course, like it's advertising, right? It's not like, they're literally holding you back from movies and shit, but they are relentlessly like telling you, flashing to you, like, this is fucking expensive. Watch this, please, And then we're like, okay, goddamn, Jesus Christ, fine, fuck, I'll watch your movie, and then we watch it and we're like, eh. And then most of the time the responses for mid films is, well, it is because of woke culture, it is because of this, it is because of that, it is social movements that don't need to be in. Why are there fucking diverse characters? I don't get it. Diversity is weird. All that doesn't really matter if you have an absolute shit fucking story. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter who's in the cast. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, right? As long as you have a really good story. And I don't think it's completely lost, but I do think that with movies like The Flash and Dial of Destiny, I think this is definitely like a huge wake-up call. At least it would be for me if I were a producer, right? Working for these studios. Like, it would definitely be a wake-up call to see that, like, so it turns out people actually don't always want kind of the same shit over and over again, but with different skins, essentially. It's just like a new Call of Duty game. It's still same war crime simulator, it's nothing changed. You can still shoot a lot of people and blood goes everywhere and you go kabooms a lot more. That's basically it. I don't think I'm missing anything more, but that's for the most part like something that has been like just really been marinating in my brain as of late. And, starting this podcast, I knew I wanted to talk about so many things. And I thought that like a neat little exercise is talk about these things every day, in however long, 45 minutes, hopefully a little over an hour, who knows? We'll see. So yeah, I think if somebody asked me, like, what do we do? Which I don't know anybody who would want to ask me. Well, I already talked about it. What am I saying? Anyways, so that's about it. That is literally that's it. I don't know anything more other than getting into more manipulator news. So I am still in the process of storyboarding my very first feature that I wrote just a month ago. I finished a month ago. That took me 10 years to write, essentially. Go check out The Last Potty if you don't know what the F I'm talking about. But these... what I realized with writing and storyboarding and all that is that, like, a lot of times things that maybe like too, I don't know if a big budget movie really can help make a film like millions of dollars, which I know is like such a dumb thing to say because, of course, yeah, like, duh, right? But like, it's just what dawns on me the most with these big budget movies, going back to big budget shit. See, I can't let go. Going back to what these big budget movies definitely mean, or at least what they make, is they centralize all their focus onto one specific thing. And that's the thing that boggles my mind the most, is that you have all, like, apparently there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of scripts that go through Hollywood all the time. But none of these scripts ever get made because they don't call, or I guess they don't really speak to anybody who thinks that, like, it will or won't make money, right? And it's hard to make that same justification for films that were out in the 70s because there was no certainty of any franchise except for, until later in the 70s, right? When they realized that sequels are actually fucking awesome. People come out for sequels no matter what. Which, yeah, cool, but I mean, god damn, they took so many chances. They took so many chances. The Exorcist, I mean, come on. That's a film that one might assume just would never fucking happen. And also Animal House. Animal House. And for those of you who don't know, it's a comedy that was made in 1978 that had like Saturday Night Live people. And it was like a super duper comedy, but so different in a way of like how comedies are, today and whatnot. So again, who would have thought that movies like that would generate hundreds of millions of dollars, $120 million domestically for Animal House, a film about a fraternity. You know what I mean? It's just a frat boy shit. No different than, American Pie. So again, we're gonna move on to other shit, but like it always baffles me. I've always loved seeing movies in history like this because I never really think about it as much as, like, I mean, of course, now that I've done like a fair amount of research, that I realize that, like, going through all these films, it's like the amount from the 70s to 80s, like the amount of franchise sequel films just fucking skyrocketed. It's insane. While there are, of course, like original films and whatnot, these original films that score big are also like by huge actors and whatnot. So yeah, of course, like there are films that, require any attention. You will need to attach like a big name actor for it, right? Which, I mean, yeah. I have a few thoughts about that, but that's for another episode. So yeah, that's it. I think big budget movies are a problem, and getting movies out is the biggest thing that anybody can do because there are already too many fucking movies at all. There are so many movies already as it is that, like, we have all the more reason to invest in those movies rather than just invest in like two giant films that cost damn near $300 million to fucking make and then put it out. And that's not including marketing and shit. I don't understand why you would want to go for that when it's so much easier to spread your wealth around other independent films, knowing full well that not every single one of those films is going to hit. Probably none of them. But that's what producers don't want to hear. They don't want to hear that like their film is just going to fail. Of course not. Nobody wants their film to fail, right? But you definitely, at least nowadays, are signing up for big disappointment, a big failure if you keep making, superhero shit. Unless it's A, super original, and B, it's something that is like, just fucking hits close to home. You know what I mean? So how do you know? You just don't. That's the fucked up part. Until you make the film. And that's kind of how it is, ladies and gentlemen. When you make a movie, you're not, it's like with however much marketing you can push for a film, you cannot force somebody to watch a movie, right? So with all these advertising and shit, it clearly shows that like how many people are just fucking over the same shit over and over and over again. And I definitely hear podcasts basically echoing the same shit, but not really break down what it is about all these like decades that just really popped the fuck off. Like the 70s, right? As opposed to the 2010s, which the 2010s is just only fucking franchise films, only existing IP. When the original shit happened, at least in the first half of the 70s. A lot of original shit. Well, in the second half of the 70s. So, yeah, ladies and gentlemen, that's that. And we're going to do a little bit of a manipulator update. I am working on the storyboards. It's interesting because I don't know like what to storyboard other than to just storyboard the entire fucking thing. And really, really break down all of like the post-apocalyptic world building stuff. And before any of you ask, oh shit, does this boy know how to draw? No, I don't know how to draw. I wanted to work at Pixar when I was younger, and I got a how to draw a Mickey Mouse drawing book from like Disney years ago, and I didn't even make it to the second page. I was like, nah, this is too hard. Don't want to do it. Don't want to learn. I do love animation and I do love drawing, especially like other people's drawings and stuff. I love that shit. I love looking at it, but I just can't draw for shit. So when I make these storyboards, the thing that I want to approach with is like the direction, but also like in particular, like what's in frame and what has to be in frame and what kind of shots we're following and whatnot. And none of these storyboards are at all good. They look like a 5-year-old fucking just went crazy on Procreate and just did some wacky shit, right? But when you look at it in reference to the script, like I make it as transparent as possible to show that like, all right, this is the shot, this is where we turn, this is where we, establish or end our shot or whatever, right? That's just it's all easier said easier described over visuals than it is just by writing alone. And of course, like just a regular ass storyboard just doesn't really do its justice, especially for like action sequences. But you can get like, I feel like you can get really close with it. But we'll see. I still need to, I don't know if you can hear the fireworks, but they are just, it is, I don't understand. It is midnight and these bastards are not going to bed. I don't get it. I really don't get it. Whatever. But, don't you people have jobs? Good grief. So, yeah, the storyboard is awesome because it gives me a little more a little more of a specific, I guess, like vision on exactly what I want to watch or what I want to see. But of course, that's all subjective, right? Because anything changes. No script is really finished until like the until you're on the editing room floor. You know, like you made the film. You're just now in the process of editing it and stuff, you know? So for the script, and also too, I wanted to tack on to yesterday's topic on the script, and I touched on it a little bit, but I feel like I didn't get. I guess like I didn't share enough of it, and that is writing the script, like, and writing any script is difficult just in of itself, but writing a script in a way that is specifically you is it feels way more daunting than it actually is. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times a lot of people would give advice and say the same shit. Write what you know. I think that's a very rudimentary and dumb way to go about it. Because that's the whole point of you having an imagination and telling the story that you want to tell. Now, I think what the quote really means, I guess, and I could be wrong, is that like write the things that reflect you, that reflect who you are as a person. And it's easier said than done, right? It's not like you can just bear all your personality onto one specific character. It's not usually how it works, because you sort of have to treat these characters like they are human beings, like they are, okay, not that they're real, but real enough that makes you feel attached to these characters. And once you do, you're already in the beginning of a good script or a good story, you know. If you got all that with characters and the story that you want to tell. So with that, I that's just something that just also was a thing that I remembered while I was editing, that like, yeah, I think that like a lot of times these films really do have emotional impacts because it reflects, like I said, with the 70s film, like it reflects the time and it reflects the filmmakers themselves and I guess like the struggle that they find themselves in, right? Which calls for, you know, an engaging and deep story, because ultimately like these stories that are being told aren't necessarily like, all right, here's the plot. It's fucking 2085 and androids are taking over the world and Will Smith has to save the day. It's like, you know, like, sure, you can probably spin it and make it like somewhat of an enjoyable experience, but like, it's not really much of an experience if you can't really relate with the characters. And if you can't relate with the characters, then the more disengaged you're just going to be when it comes to a movie. At least for me, I can only speak for myself, right? I definitely don't feel connected with a film if I myself can't really get into the world or the mindset of the characters they're in, or at least relate to them in some way, shape, or form. Of course, you're not going to relate to every single character, right? But like that's what makes it a great story is how interesting and how deep you can make these characters, which is why I think documentaries have kind of been a bigger resurgence, especially in like the true crime era of it all, because there's a lot of like victims of those like super horrible, unfortunate circumstances that you or me or anybody who you know would make those same decisions. Well, at least for the most part, maybe not all of them, because there's definitely some brain dead people out there who just fucking can't understand that like murder is bad. Fucking say telecop or something, you know, call somebody, you know? So I think that like, you know, I do think that like smaller budget films are the way to go for the future. You know, I don't know if there's really any other way of describing that other than that. Just like there's gotta be a lot more. There's got to be a lot more choices, but there's got to be a lot more variety. You know, it's just like people don't even know the difference between DC films and Marvel films nowadays. You know, it's just like to a lot of people, they're all the same, which is fair. It's very fair. As a Marvel boy myself, like I'm not really much of a DC guy, but like I can see the similarities and all that shit, right? Because there really hasn't been a ton of like multiversal superhero films that are like ultra bangers, you know? So it's hard to just be like, well, there's this, and this that are really good superhero films, which I can probably tell you why they're good, but like at the same time, it's just like, it's the same way of like describing, like why I like James Bond films, right? I love vanilla ice cream, so I know what I'm going to get, right? It's kind of the same idea of reality shows, which, yeah, I might not watch a lot of that, and I've definitely watched some, but I don't watch all of it, but I 100% understand why that is like comfort shit, right? It's kind of the same thing for like action films and superhero films. I love these films. And I love, you know, a lot of franchise stuff, but when you get something original that comes your way, you just sort of like just think, what the fuck? Like when did this happen? Like why didn't I know about this? Which brings me to the watch list, ladies and gentlemen. That's right. This is the first episode where I am going to be talking about the shit that I have watched. So let's get this shit started. I kind of had a head start already for a few days, you know, because yesterday I was just more worried about like making sure I talk about myself and the script and the history of film for me. So now we can get into the fun shit. And that is the watch list, right? So I watched a 2016 classic called The Void, right? And The Void, for those of you who don't know, is a 2016 horror film that is made by two directors. And let me tell you how crazy this film is. It is a crazy film that is made for barely any money. They said the budget is less than 82,000, which I don't know if that's necessarily true, because there is like a you know, like financial in the traditional means, and I know that they raised 82,000 on a Kickstarter for prosthetics. because the directors also fucking like one of the directors did like the production design, and one of them did the special effects and stuff like that. So let's actually pull up the IMDb here, because it's truly fascinating the amount of innovation that you put in for a film that is part of a bygone era that is practical effects, ladies and gentlemen. Because practical effects, for those of you who don't know, is very much like I want to say it's like a it was a big thing back in the 70s and the 80s. I don't know why I can't talk all of a sudden. It's like, it's like that shit in the Matrix where my mouth is just like all like big. It was very prevalent in the 80s and the 90s, right? Which The Void would have easily thrived in and probably even be forgettable, right? But the fact that this was made the way it was, and of course there's some CGI in it, but don't get me wrong, the amount of practical effects, most producers and directors would rather and easily and less painstakingly depend on CGI, which, listen, nothing wrong with CGI. However, there is definitely CGI that is better than others. The Flash. So, it's you take with what you can get. All right. All cast and crew. So yeah, Jeremy Gillespie and Steven Kostanski directed this wonderful film, and they wrote it, of course. And they produced it, and the music is by I thought the music was also by Jeremy Gillespie. It says okay, interesting. All right, I could have sworn I doesn't matter, but Jeremy also did the production design, makeup department. It's just they're all over the place. Art department, yeah, they're all over the place. They did graphic design too. It's great. A classic Ari Aster film called Beau is Afraid. I don't know if it's classic, but it was in the theaters recently. And it was a pretty big budget film, I want to say. I don't fully know how much, other than that it's got to be at least 35 million. Yeah, so it's a $35 million dollar film that only made a quarter of that. So, yeah, I don't know. And not for nothing, it's a 3-hour movie. That's a really big investment for people to just sit through 3 hours. That's the other thing too. 3-hour films is asking a lot for people, right? Like I like The Void. It's an hour and a half long. You get in, you get out, you fuck up, it's just, you get the story, you get the problem, you get the journey, and then you get the solution, the climax, and then you're out, you're done, whereas Beau is Afraid is a little bit different than that. I think the first act of Beau is Afraid is really well done. When it is in respects to the apartment, which, by the way, we're talking spoilers. I probably should have mentioned that from the tip top, and I'm sorry. But yeah, the first act is great, but once without spoiling it, once they left once Joaquin Phoenix's character left the apartment complex, the movie just fucking goes all over the place. It is a weird, trippy movie, but Of course, this is Ari Aster. We're talking Midsummer. We're talking Hereditary, which I feel like for how weird they are, there was still a bit of control, despite that, like, again, they're like 2 hours and some change, right? Both movies, I think. There's plenty of times where I definitely may or may not have checked out of this film. Nothing against Ari Aster. I think he's he's a phenomenal filmmaker. I loved Hereditary, and I also loved the short that he made. I think Beau is Scared, or like Beau. It was something Beau. I think it was just called Beau. And for those of you who did watch the film, the short is, for those of you who haven't seen the short, it's basically like the first 30 minutes of the film, except for the first like 5 minutes, like the opening stuff, and like, okay, maybe the first 15. So like once you get to the 25-minute mark, you like, it becomes apparent that it's a major expansion from that short film, which was only like, I want to say like a little over 10 minutes long. Yeah, I think that the film is again, it's fine. Adam, do you even review films? No, I just say all of them are just fine. I'm kidding. No, I think that, like, out of all the films, this was definitely the least performing, just by the fact, just by nature of just the constant unraveling of more exposition and more storytelling, only for us to get to the end, and the payoff was sort of there, but there was still way too many questions. And I guess that's the point. You know, I think that's the point, is just like, you're going to be left with way more head scratching questions than the answers. And maybe there's a few questions that were answered, but not really. It's just such a weird fucking trip. Great cast though, you know, Joaquin Phoenix, Parker Posey, Michael Gandolfini, Tony Soprano's son, real life son. Great stuff, you know. Is Beau is Afraid amazing? But what I can tell you is very amazing. The third and final film. I don't know if I'm going to have like this amount of shit that I will talk about in terms of movies, because I just want to get through them, because we're already over an hour and I kind of want to wrap this shit up. So last one, and then after this I'm probably going to do maybe one, maybe two. Secret Invasion is going to come out in like a few hours, so probably tomorrow's podcast we're going to talk about Secret Invasion a little bit. And probably another movie, hopefully, you know, if I have the fucking time. The last one I want to talk about is Emily the Criminal, an Aubrey Plaza joint that is, in my opinion, the best Aubrey Plaza. Aubrey Plaza, not Audrey. Jesus Christ, Adam, get it together. Aubrey Plaza, okay. I just want to pull up the information. So, great film. John Patton Ford. John Patton Ford. I think wrote and directed this. And like, look, it is again one of those films that just is so fucking awesome that it's like, again, it came out in 2022, and it's just like, this is like the kind of film that I would expect everybody to talk about, right? But it did, like, there was no advertising, there was no anything other than like 4 or 5 days ago I stumbled upon this. I think by like I think by Netflix or something. It was just like randomly. And I was like, Aubrey Plaza, wait, what the fuck? What is this? And then I looked at like a bit of a scene and I was like, hold on. I gotta watch this shit now. This is off the chain. And then, yeah, it was off the fucking chain, y'all. It is. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how else to describe it other than like, let me give like a brief synopsis. It is basically about a woman who is just super down on her luck. She has absolutely no prospective future other than going into the line of criminality, hence the name Emily the Criminal. And she gets into the pretty dangerous, and I had no idea how dangerous this world is, a pretty dangerous world of credit card fraud. That's as far as I'm going to say. And I'll just say this. By the third act, I was hoping it wasn't going to just like fall flat on its face. It didn't. It 100% did not. And it followed through tremendously to the point where like in the last 5 minutes, it's like one of those things you're like, that's the shit. In my opinion, I think it's a great fucking movie. Shout out to Aubrey Plaza. Shout out to Theo Rossi. And all the like the rest of the cast is like super fucking job well done. John Patton Ford, shouts out. I'm not familiar with his work, but apparently, this was his first. Oh wow! I thought he did other shit. Oh, that's crazy. That's his first film. Wow. So yeah, shouts out to him. We got to see more shit from that. And that's about it, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. All right. Gotta go, and I gotta edit this, and it's already 12:30, and I'm starving. Okay. So, thank you so much for joining me on this wonderful journey on why big budget movies are a huge problem, and updating on the script and the watch list and stuff like that. So, again, we're gonna be coming back to this tomorrow. And hopefully I'll see you guys then. And until next time,